Have the stories we've heard today not been incredible? Is this not amazing? You come to an event like this and it's so much fun. You're hearing such amazing tales of groundbreaking research, life-saving science advancements. Awesome, awesome stuff. But see, there's a reason that it creates such a inspiring response, right? But okay, that was terrible, I know. But see, there's a reason that it creates that response. And part of it is just because we as humans have an incredible affinity for telling stories, for hearing this kind of stuff. We have this unique ability to communicate verbally in a way that not only portrays information, but also thoughts, feelings, emotion. But it's not just our affinity for stories. It's also because this is atypical. We don't do this every day. This isn't the norm, especially for those of us that work in the scientific and technical communities. Let's be honest, we do kind of a very poor job of telling our stories. Most of us are so far down the rabbit holes of our own research, we don't even realize we've created and are using an entirely different language. So much so that if you don't already work in our specific technical field or you're not in our little group, you probably don't have a clue what we're even talking about. And the truth of the matter is, that's why I'm here. That's the only reason I am here. I haven't had any scientific, incredible advancements. I've never invented anything new. I hold no records. I've never been in a combat zone, never done anything like that. I'm just your average, ordinary first lieutenant. But I was placed in one of those positions where I didn't speak the language, and I had to figure out how to do my job anyway. And as part of that process, I learned a whole lot about communication and a few key lessons about telling a story that I want to pass on today. So my background was mechanical engineering. In college, I studied things like structures, materials, good solid things you can put your hands on and feel. Well, then I commissioned, was coded as a 62E developmental engineer, and assigned to the Directed Energy Directorate down at Kirtland Air Force Base. I show up, get my assignment, start checking in, and get my first job title. Laser Weapon Aerodynamic Effects Engineer. Is that not obnoxious? Yeah, I didn't get it the first time either, so one more time. Laser Weapon Aerodynamic Effects Engineer. Now at this point, I had a fairly good idea of what a laser was, not a laser weapon, what a laser was, and I'd taken one class on aerodynamics. I had no idea of how the two affected each other or why the Air Force cared. I was in a situation where I didn't speak the language and was going to have to figure it out. I show up to my first meeting, all excited, good little motivated second lieutenant ready to take notes, only to very quickly discover how far over my head I was. I didn't have a clue. I started writing down every acronym I didn't recognize and all the terminology, right? Made it to a third column before the end of this hour-long meeting. I was so lost and was going to have to figure it out. So, as part of my new unexpected language intensive course, broke out the textbooks, started trying to figure out what is all this laser physics about, what's going on with optics, diving in. And in one particular book, I came across a quote that radically changed how I viewed my job. It was a book on Schlieren imagery by G.S. Settles. And in the foreword, Settles is talking about how he wants his book to be very readable. And then he uses the line, he says, technology must not become the Tower of Babel. And as I read it, it was like, yes, amen. I wanted to stand up and applaud, but I was sharing an office at the time. That might have looked weird. So held that down. But anyway, technology must not become the Tower of Babel. Settles is referencing a story from very early on in the Bible. And in that story, everybody on earth spoke the same language. And they all got together and said, hey, let's build a big city, tower, monument to ourselves. So they start working on it. They start building it up. Well, God looks down, doesn't like that they're all obsessed with themselves, and says, I got to stop this. And the way he does it is he mixes up their language. So all of a sudden, everybody's working, and they stop, because it's like, wait a minute, what is he saying? Huh? And they start trying to figure out what's going on. And everybody kind of starts grouping together, and new little subgroups of languages emerge, and then all these groups kind of wander off, leaving nothing but a rubble of a half-built tower. And see, that's an incredible, incredible example of what can happen when we in the technical community forget and lose that ability to communicate. When language becomes a gap to collaboration, all we're left with is a broken monument to the possible. And see, this idea, it struck me so much because it's like, wow, okay, not only is my job to learn this new language, to understand what's going on and be able to technically speak about it well, but also to maintain my ability to communicate in everyday English, to be able to translate between the scientific jargon and communicating with everybody else, to be that bridge and that gap that can allow collaboration. I was super excited and pretty much had an opportunity to put this into practice dropped in my lap shortly thereafter. See, my branch chief called me and another lieutenant in, and he gave us a challenge. He said, okay, you've got 1 month. I want you guys to go back and come up with a tour concept, some way of packaging what we do here in our program and explaining it to somebody in a way that communicates what we're doing, how it fits together, and then how it fits into the bigger picture. We said, yes, sir, we're on it. So we go back to the office. We're all excited. Pull out the whiteboard, start jotting down, okay, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. And very quickly realize, whoa, hold up. We got a lot going on. And if I try to talk about all this, like we're looking at right now, this is going to be the world's longest, most ridiculous tour we've ever heard of. And what we realized we needed to do was an idea and a process that what I'm going to call is the first of 3 steps that I want to talk about today as far as building a story and telling a story. And that first process, that first idea is we needed to identify our message. What is the core foundation? What is it exactly that you want to say? Because if you don't start out with identifying exactly what it is you want to talk about, you're going to get lost and you're going to lose something. Have you ever tried to tell a story? Trying to tell somebody, oh man, this incredible trip, how it went down, but you're kind of time constrained. And so as you go into it, you start building it up and you're talking about stuff and then you're like, oh gosh, I'm burning through my time. Okay, I got to cut this. Well, but if I cut that, that's not going to make sense. And I really want to hit this story. And next thing you know, you've kind of stumbled and mumbled and you have never communicated anything in your story and you're out of time. And see, that's exactly what happens if we don't start with that core foundational idea. What's the one sentence? What's that one idea that I really want to communicate? For my team, we were able to boil down that entire whiteboard of ideas into one sentence. What we came up with was, we are interested in identifying and correcting vibrational and optical challenges presented by an airborne environment to a laser weapon system. I never said it had to be a short sentence, just one sentence. But let's break it down though, because it's really not that complex, right? Identifying and correcting. What's going wrong? How do I fix it? Vibrational and optical disturbances. What's shaking and what's distorting my beam? Airborne environment is where I'm working. Laser weapon systems is what I'm working on. You come up with that core idea, our demos practically built themselves. It's a box. It has 2 sides. One talks about vibration. The other talks about the optical challenge. They show identification and correction. Boom. We were super excited. We're like, all right, we got our story. We know what we're going to talk about. Here we go. Let's do it. So we go off. One of the first events we got to talk to was at the Pentagon, speaking to senior DoD leaders. About 2 weeks later, we find ourselves back in the lab at Kirtland speaking to ROTC cadets. Now, this is where we ran into problem number 2 and realized our work was not close to done. Because as you can imagine, the perspective difference between senior officials at the Pentagon and ROTC cadets is rather large. There's quite a discrepancy there. And we had our core idea. We knew exactly what we were going to talk about. But one of the most important things you'll learn is how to connect with an audience. You have to give them the why. Why should they care about what you're saying? And the why over here was related to the strategic impact of lasers. How can they affect the battlefield? What are the key things that they bring? Over here, they just wanted to know, how do you do research? What do you do? What does a second lieutenant at the time as a 6'2" operate? What is my job going to be in the future? Now, I can answer both of those questions based on the same core idea of identifying and correcting vibrational and optical challenges, right? But to do that, the second idea is adapt. You have to adapt to your audience. We can't get stuck on one specific script that we've built off of our core idea, because hitting those whys takes that adaptation. Now, I'll give you an example of where we've all run into when this completely and utterly fails. How many times have we had the unfortunate experience of having to call customer support, right? You call, and after they inform you that this call may be monitored for quality assurance purposes. Yeah, right. They launch into their script, you know, name, number, account number, blah, blah, blah. And about 30 seconds in, you just want to scream. It's like, shut up and listen to me. I have a question. I didn't call to answer your questions. I need help, right? It's so painful because they're stuck on a script. But see, if we do the exact same thing, if we identify our core idea and we build one script and we're excited about our script, we've memorized our script, and we're going to use our script. It's exactly what we're doing. You've got to be able to adapt and flex. How can I use this information to explain those strategic factors about how a laser weapon system is going to affect the environment? How can I use that same idea of how I personally connected with the research? How did I develop this information? That's how you learn to adapt to your audience. Now, I will be the first to admit that is not an easy skill. That is very, very challenging. There are several people out there that are naturally gifted at this. For the vast majority of us, it takes a whole lot of work, which is why, third and final point, repetition. You got to practice over and over and over and over again, right? Once you find that idea, start working on your ideas. Get them down. Find that mirror. You know, speech coaches always talk about find the mirror, give it to the mirror, film yourself, right? Learn your information. We've got to have that information down so that we are very, very comfortable talking about our technology, talking about our area, and doing so in a way that doesn't contain scientific jargon, that doesn't contain those terms that other people are going to look at us like we have 3 eyes and speaking Chinese. It's like, what are you talking about? We've got to be able to do that. But then, once you understand it, you've got to get out to a live audience. Go talk to people. Because there's nothing that can simulate getting asked questions and having to come up with answers. For my team, we got our demos. We started going around base, calling in other CGOs. Hey, come down to my lab. I want to show you something. We took our demos over to the contracting building, to the business offices. Hey, can we talk to you guys on the lunch break? Here's what's going on. When we ran out of people on base, we started calling local schools. Hey, can I come to your science classroom? What do you got going? Like, can I come before school, after school? You would not believe the level of questions that 4th and 5th graders will throw at you. Now, they may not have the technical complexity to be able to ask those kind of questions, but if your system has shortfalls or gaps, they will find them and they will ask you about them that fast. Excuse me, sir, how can you, that's a very good question, Sarah. That's what we're working on. That kind of a live audience feedback, engaging, getting asked questions is how you refine and develop your story. That's really where that repetition will come into play. Now, these demos have kind of sparked a minor revolution among our division. Lots of different programs. It's no longer just mine. Or taking a hard look at how we tell our story. How can we engage wider and different audiences? What can we do to develop tools like this that will help us get our message out there? Personally, I still have that quote, "Technology must not become the Tower of Babel," taped as a daily reminder on the side of my monitor to remind me of how I need to be communicating to all those around me. And across AFRL, we are doing an incredible, incredible amount of research. There are amazing, amazing scientific breakthroughs happening every day in a vast array of scientific disciplines. But the truth of the matter is, if we can't tell anybody about it, if we don't know how to communicate that story, it doesn't matter, and no one's ever going to know. So that's my challenge to you today. What is your story, and why haven't you told it? Thank you.